Hi, my name is James Greasley, coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. I'm excited to be here. In this first video, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about who I am, my background, and why I'm generally interested in this role. So first question, do I currently have a PhD? I do not, but I do have an advanced degree, a graduate degree in healthcare, and my healthcare training has given me a serious scientific foundation across a lot of different disciplines: anatomy, physiology, pathology, biochemistry, and not just surface level things. And honestly, I've never stopped learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always searching out new information, new research, and so I believe that this makes me a well-rounded candidate for this role. So, big question, why do I want to work for your company for Supreme Optimization? Well, when I first came across this role, it generally excited me. It really aligned with who I am. Healthcare and writing has always been two things that I really, really care about. And for a long time, they've always sort of lived in two different boxes. And something that I realized while working in a clinical setting is the impact that you can have on a patient is tremendous. I mean, it's incredible to help someone. It's very meaningful, but it also has a ceiling. And I've realized that good content doesn't have that ceiling. A well-written piece of content can reach thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. It can help them make better decisions about their health, understand a treatment or a product, trust a company that's generally trying to help them. And I've seen firsthand that good content really educates, it builds trust, it moves people, and that is another form of helping people. It's just at a much larger scale. And that's exactly what Supreme Optimization does for its clients. So this isn't a role that just appeals for me. It's one that I generally feel aligned with, and I think I could do an amazing job based on my experience and my passion and what I really, really care about. So that's a little bit about who I am, why I'm here, and why I'm interested in the role. In the next video, I'll get into the science background and walk you through how I approach writing. Thank you for watching. Hello again. So this one, we're going to go over the actual work, covering a few of the science questions, and then I'm going to walk you through my approach to content from brief to finished piece. So let's get right into it. All right, so first question, what are competent cells? Who would use them? So competent cells are basically bacterial cells, usually E. coli, that have been prepared to accept foreign DNA. Normally, bacteria won't just let DNA in, so you have to treat them to make the membrane permeable enough. Now, once they're open, you can insert a plasmid, essentially a DNA construct that you've designed, and then the bacteria will replicate it for you. So suddenly, instead of a tiny amount of your genetic material, you have an unlimited supply. So typically, the people who would use these are molecular biologists. They use them constantly, cloning, drug development, protein production. It's a foundational tool that's used in a lab. Okay. Next one is, what is in situ hybridization? What is the use case? So ISH is a technique that lets you see where specific genes are being expressed directly within the tissue. The in situ part just means in place. You're not extracting anything. You're looking at the tissue as it is. You introduce a labeled probe that binds to your target sequence, and that label shows you exactly which cells or regions are active. The reason it's so useful is where not just in where this gene is expressed, but where in the tissue, which matters enormously in something like like cancer research. It's also widely used in developmental biology, tracking how gene expression changes as an organism develops. So for what would an isosome isolation kit be used? So they're used to isolate exosomes from biological samples like blood or urine so that you can study them. Exosomes carry biological information from the cells that release them, which makes them really useful for understanding diseases, detecting biomarkers, or developing new therapies. The kit gives you a reliable, standardized way to pull them out of a complex sample very cleanly. And big use cases right now are things like cancer treatments, cancer diagnostics, neuroscience research, and drug delivery development. Okay. So the next question, regarding the writing sample that I provided, So for my writing sample, I did something a little different. Rather than submitting a sort of a piece that I'd worked on with someone else or myself, I wrote a landing page specifically for Supreme Optimization. The brief I gave was, take what this company does and translate it for the life sciences audience that they serve, which is exactly what the work I'd be doing in this role. So I started with where I always start, with the reader in mind and the decision that they're trying to make. So the headline, "Turn complex science into clear, actionable decisions," came from thinking about what the audience actually needs. I structured it around the problem first, then moving into the approach, and then the process. So the whole page is written to be scannable but credible, sort of short, clear sections. I wanted to show that I understand both the science side and the commercial side, and that I can write for an audience that sort of sees through anything that feels really like salesy. Essentially, I tried to write kind of the page that would make Supreme Optimization or your company proud to have me representing them as something that you could showcase. Okay, and walk you through my writing process. So as I sort of mentioned before, I always like to start with the audience. Before I write a single word on the page, I really want to know, who's reading this and what do they actually care about. What keeps them up at night? What problem are they trying to solve? Then I like to dig into source material, looking for the angle, the thing that really makes someone want to keep reading rather than just kind of skim it and close it, especially when attention spans are short these days. I learned a lot of this writing content from my own practice. With the experience, I done something or have something clinically accurate, something like sciatic, chronic headaches, migraines. But just being accurate alone doesn't really help anyone. So the question I kept asking was, what does this actually mean for this person's life? And so that instinct is sort of what I carry with me. So that starts with, again, outline. Really gives me a roadmap, where I'm going, where I'm starting, middle, end point, and make sure that we hit every exit or route along the way. Then the first draft is really about getting everything on paper and out of your head and onto the page, and then getting all the relevant information out. And then the second pass is really about making it look good, making it pleasurable to read. I use tools like Grammarly, to make sure everything is written properly. I read everything out loud before it's done, just so that it sounds, natural if someone who's reading it out loud. If not, I give it another pass. And then I usually like to also leave a little gap at the very end for a final review, because I think as a writer, you can get really into your own project and it sounds really good in your own head. But then always having a fresh set of eyes, or at least taking a step back and then coming back to it, really provides a really good perspective around your work. Okay, now moving into the scenario. So working with a client who needs ongoing content but hasn't provided specific direction, how would I go about identifying and suggesting relevant topics for them? So for this scenario, the first thing I would most likely do is audit what they've already published, understand the territory, the gaps, what they're working with. Then I would do my best to research and get into the audience's head. Here's something that I've learned from my own marketing. People don't, search for clinical terminology, right? They search for what they're feeling. Nobody kind of Googles lumbar radiculopathy. They Google, why does my leg go numb? So the gap between how experts talk and how real people think, I think that's really where the good content lives. So I would layer in some, after that, I'd layer in some good competitor research, probably go over some regulatory developments, industry news for life sciences, clients specifically, potentially also find if there are any other use cases or examples of what they're trying to do. Has it been done before? How well was it done before? And then I would take all that information and I would map it into something structured. Topics that, again, tie where the reader is to their journey, so the client can see the breakdown of the thinking, not just the list of ideas or the end result. So in my view, the most important role of content marketing in a client's overall marketing strategy is, I feel like on the top of it, I want to say trust, but I'll go a little bit deeper. I think one of the most important things is making complex things feel relevant to a real person's life or work, something that they can really identify with personally. That's definitely the core challenge in a lot of the writing I've done in the past. you can accurately explain the biomechanics, the mechanics of chronic headaches, things like that. But accuracy isn't really, again, what makes someone make a change. What ends up making a change is connecting to that individual, right? It's the helping them see themselves in the content and having them connect directly to the content. So I think that's really what good content does for any brand, in life sciences, especially like with a sophisticated, I think in this day and age, often skeptical audience. They can tell when something is just thin, or if you're just trying to sell them something, versus content that really earns the trust by being genuinely useful. And I think that's how you earn the trust, is you are useful first and foremost. You treat them you then treat them like an intelligent audience, intelligent professionals. When you do that consistently, I think you really build credibility credibility that really influences decisions. So some of the strengths that I have, I think the top ones for me is empathy. I've spent a lot of time in healthcare, a lot of time, really listening to people's needs, and like I said, being able to empathize with people in many, many different situations. I think this is a really, really big skill, because I'm able to put myself in other people's shoes, and I do my best to generally understand where other people are coming from. Another strength, I believe, is just being an active listener. I think, trying to get out of my head and not just waiting for when it's my turn to talk, but actually hearing the person, the client, the audience, whoever you're speaking with, really understanding and listening to where they're coming from and what they're saying. And then another strength, I think, would be both being, a lifelong learner and being wildly creative. Always looking for new solutions or better solutions to old problems, and always learning. I mean, I think that's one of the greatest joys in life, is you can always learn something new, read something new, and I believe that those are big strengths of mine. So one of the big weaknesses, I think, for me is hard time saying no. I think I definitely overextend myself. I think it comes from a good place, as it does, but I care about doing good work and I want to help. But the practical effect is sometimes I do burn myself out. I've gotten a lot better at it, catching it before I overcommit myself or overcommit to more than I can deliver. But it is something that I'm actively managing. But that, I would say, is one of the bigger weaknesses that I've sort of noticed over the years and have tried to address and work on. Okay, and for this scenario, 10 points, 2 categories. This is an interesting one. I think I would maybe allocate 6 points to smart and 4 points to hardworking. I think I would allocate them because, looking back, I do wonder, the smarts come from all the study and the hard work. I think that, I've met and been around very, very intelligent people, that were naturally, born very naturally gifted, got things very easily. But I've also been around really intelligent people that will be the first to tell you that they got where they were because they worked hard. And I think it's a split for me. I think because you become smart by working hard, you constantly learn, you develop, you question, you critique. And I think over a long time, over years and years and years, learning to kind of cultivate that hard work ethic, that, relentless learner, I think makes you a smart individual. And so I think that's what I also have in me, is if I don't know something, I'll look it up. If I don't understand something, I'll look it up. I'll learn, I'll figure it out. And I think that lends a lot to why I sort of split the points the way that I did. So was I naturally organized, or is this something I had to teach myself? 100% I had to teach myself this. I was not very natural. I was not very organized growing up. I've always had to kind of create systems for myself in high school, undergrad, graduate, and far beyond, even in my own clinical practice, constantly creating systems to help me work, help my workflow, help me stay organized. This is definitely something that I have taught myself over the years. So my most recent manager, I've mainly been self-employed for a lot of my life, but recently I did work in Seattle for almost a year, working for a clinic with, his name is Dr. Nazar. And I think if you were to call them and ask on my performance, they'd probably give me an 8.5. I think part of that is, first to show up, always looking for what needs to be done, kind of have that I don't know if I'd say that owner mindset of more just, not waiting for someone else to do something. If there's something that needs to get done, you just get it done. And I think, in a small, at least with a small clinical setting, there's a lot of value in that, in not having to just wait and tell someone to do something, or not just having to wait to be told to do something, but always kind of scanning and seeing what needs to be done and really kind of putting in that extra effort. So that's why I believe I'd be given that score. I'd say, I know if probably people probably give this a lot, but definitely lean probably towards an ambivert or a little bit introverted. I love social settings. I love my friends, my family, events, but the classic definition of the word, I do not gain energy from being in social situations. So while I do love being around people and I do love the social aspect, I really do get a lot of my energy, a lot of my peace from being alone and spending periods of time in introspection. I find it very, very restorative, and that's also a lot of times where I get a lot of my deep work done, is sort of in that introverted setting. One of the big things I do for fun: hike, snowboard, golf. Go on walks, spend time with my dog. I love to read and write. That's a big passion of mine. Um, yeah, those would be the big ones. Last thing, I think it's worth saying. Combination I think I bring to the table is a bit unusual, and I know that, but I see it in a very positive way. I think being in a healthcare background means that science isn't foreign to me. I'm very well versed in it. I'm also very well versed in its practical applications. It's given me an understanding of what the stakes are from the human side, and it's not abstract. So, I really constantly every single day sat across some patients whose lives were affected by their health, and then also my creative writing background has basically given me the ability where I don't just transfer information onto a page. I find the story in it, the narrative in it, try to find what really makes a reader actually want to keep going and actually connect and engage with them. And I think that that's a rare combination, and that's something that I bring to the table. And so I really want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the exercise and the project I worked on, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.